Thanks for downloading this episode of the Resilient Advisor Podcast. My name is Jay Coulter, and this is the Advisor Growth Series. My partner for this project is Jay Hummel of the Wealth Advisor Growth Network. Jay, let's get right to it. A term that you've used a lot in your career is return on advice. I love that term. Walk listeners through it.
Yeah, I think it's on both sides. It's on the advisor side and it's on the client side. You know, you and I are in agreement that great advisors deliver great return for individual investors, and they are only going to reach their goals, in my opinion, if they work with a great advisor. And so there's always a return to the client for working with a great advisor. The other side of it is advisors move financial planning to the center, moving from being product centered to advice centered. They have to think about how they're spending their time, how they're billing their customers, and they have to get a return on that advice to run meaningful firms into the future.
Let's go deep on the first part. It's my favorite topic, moving financial planning to the center of the engagement. As we've seen fee compression everywhere, margins are starting to compress, and the value proposition of the financial advisor, quite frankly, it's already changed, but there are so many advisors that have not made this pivot. Let's start soup to nuts. How does an advisor who has not made this pivot do it?
Well, first of all, I think credentialed. I mean, I do believe in the CFP, and I do believe in hiring people that are really good at the function or outsourcing it to start. But they need to start with, it's going to change the way you have to profile a client. It's going to change the way you have to start a conversation with a client. It's very easy, in my opinion, to be investment centered in a sense where you're just talking about performance and you're talking about charts and graphs. But when you move to planning to the center, you have to be comfortable talking about different topics that may be uncomfortable for advisors to have to ask those types of questions about the family situation, about a married situation. And so I think the whole profiling and learning how to have those conversations is an important first step.
So some education, some credentials, and let's get right to the meat of it. You're a 50-year-old advisor. Your practice has a couple $100 million. Everybody's in your book of business views you as an asset allocator. They don't use that terminology in their mind, and somebody who lets them know how their portfolios are performing. That pivot to adding financial planning has some unique dynamics to it. How does she execute on that, the advisor?
Well, I think one is look at team formation. I was literally with an advisor this week. He fit that exact profile. He was 52 years old. He was an advisor in Indiana. And he literally said to me, I didn't believe it. I had these junior people coming in. I hired a junior CFP, 26-year-old, talked to me about how this was important. I didn't believe it. We bought some financial planning software. We let our junior people really start to do financial planning. We started including them in meetings. He said, and over the last 2 years, we've changed the trajectory of our firm. And so I do think it's interesting. And people talk about succession and how do I bring new people into my firm? I think this pivot around the value proposition allows you to bring different types of talent. And so I challenge those firms to think differently about the resources that they have surrounding that senior advisor.
All right. So the advisor buys into bringing in financial planning in the center. They get their credentials or they outsource the credentials or bring it in-house to a junior person. They start the process. What is the conversation? Let's role play this. I'm the client. You're the advisor. You've been doing asset allocation for me for 10 years. How do you change my mind?
Well, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to say, hey, the world's changed. And we realize as a firm, we need to be doing more for you and your family. And we haven't talked to you enough about your goals and what you want to accomplish. And so today I want to just sit with you and think about, let's vision what 3 years looks like. And we're sitting here 3 years from now, and you've been unbelievably happy with what's happened. What's happened? And how do we help you get there? And so I just think it's okay to say, hey, we're changing our value proposition because we've looked at how we serve clients and we believe we need to do more for you. The world's complex, your financial situation's complex, and we realize that we need to do better for you to deal with that complexity.
That was perfect. And listeners, you need to know, I didn't tell Jay I was going to ask him that question. It's pushback that I get when working with advisors and trying to encourage them to move down the financial planning path is they don't even know how to have that conversation. So Jay, that was excellent. Let's talk a little bit about the software that advisors use. I've had Ed O'Brien from eMoney on the podcast before. We've talked about the value of delivering the advice and the technology. Money Guide Pro, Right Capital, they're all fantastic. Getting adoption of the client to actually go to the portal seems to be a challenge. Do you have any best practices that you could talk about from your work in the field?
Yeah, so get the client. So first of all, I think it's hard. You just put software in the hands of advisors, and I think software companies. Obviously, I was at one a while ago. You just assume the advisor's going to be able to do it. The software alone isn't enough. I mean, it's just the training is woefully and underwhelming in the industry. I think on the client side, it's just being creative on how you put content out there. I think the war for eyeballs is the person who owns the eyeball to the client is ultimately going to win the client relationship. And so I'm really a big believer in data aggregation. I'm a big believer in client portals, of having documents out there so that the client is actually encouraged to go out instead of just trying to hope that they're going to get there.
Got it. And giving your experience with InvestNet, have you done a deep dive on the Money Guide Pro offering on that platform?
I have.
And could you
Yeah.
speak to the new blocks offering that they have?
Yeah, I think that what they're going after is just simplicity, right? To be able to move the tiles around and have the conversation and do it real time. I think software companies have been really good at making the software complex because they believe complexity creates creates value. And I think we live in a world now where I think InvestNet and some others have realized going the other way and creating simplicity is actually providing a lot more value, not only to the advisor, but as the advisor tries to get more digitally engaged with their end client.
Yeah. I tell you, I've started using Right Capital for some planning engagements with advisors, and only because it is simple to use. And simplicity seems to get results in financial planning. Jay, we should do an episode just on financial planning software. I think it's the Wild West, and your philosophy on simplicity, I think, would really resonate if we do a dive on it. Outside of eMoney, Money Guide Pro, and Right Capital, are there any others you've seen advisors effectively adopt inside of their business?
No, those are really the ones. And I think back to just to revisit one quick thing, was with a group this week, and one of the things I think is firms are moving planning to the center. Is everyone defines planning differently, and even the end client or the prospect doesn't really understand planning. So I think the one thing the listeners need to do is be specific. Planning to us is we're going to help you plan for your kids' college. We are going to help you think about you're buying your second home or paying off your mortgage. Planning is just too esoteric. And so we were working with the 25 advisors trying to help them think about how do they get specific to a prospect so that the prospect can know what it's going to feel like to be a client. And I just think we talk about financial planning as this esoteric thing that the end customer doesn't really appreciate.
Excellent. Jay, this advisor growth series has been a home run. I really appreciate you coming on to do it with me.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is great.
The information provided is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute investment advice and should not be relied on as such. It should not be considered a solicitation to buy or an offer to sell a security. It does not take into account any investor's particular investment objectives, strategies, tax status, or investment horizon. You should consult an attorney or tax advisor. Resilient Wealth LLC is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Resilient Wealth and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. For Resilient Wealth information, please visit Investment Advisor's public disclosure website at www.advisorinfo.sec.gov by searching Resilient Wealth CRD number 301986.